Hi, everyone. This is James from the CTRL+Listen podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We have a special guest for you. This is Makoto Kern. Thank you so much for joining us today as the founder of IiImpact. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, James. Happy to be on the show and excited to talk about our topics today.
Definitely. I think we have some really interesting stuff to talk about. A lot of it's very on point for the current climate, I guess, in the tech space. So just to start, before we get into all of that stuff, can you talk us through the history of IiImpact and your background?
Sure, definitely. I started as kind of an electrical engineer, robotics engineer back in the day. That's what I went to school for, trained for. Um, you know, I I was I was always interested and got into redesigning software when I was working in the manufacturing space because that's where you see a lot of engineers built software for other engineers, but not really for people on the factory floor. And
Right.
so my job was to really tweak things, make it more efficient. And so that's where I really got introduced to like this, how the user actually works with software. And so, with Impact, I just started to get involved with like designing websites. I was on Craigslist, I was finding projects, and I got to a point where I just got so busy that I decided to quit my job and start Impact full time, which was crazy. I mean, I was going, during lunch breaks and on the way to work and on the way home, I would be making sales calls and just
Oh,
really trying to hustle. So it was a interesting time, but yeah, I was to a point where I was consulting and doing and running my business. And from there, it just kind of grew. We grew out of Chicago, and then we moved to Austin, and that's kind of where my business blew up. Really was starting to network with a lot of people in Houston, and got one of our first biggest clients there, and that's where we got introduced into like the energy space.
mhm.
We've been doing a lot of like enterprise software ever since. But I just remember, and this is our client from 10 years ago, our startup client, but they had to redesign 30 pieces of software applications for the oil and gas industry,
Wow.
and I was competing against another UX agency that I actually was following, looking up to, like hearing all this stuff, and it was so exciting to hear that. But at the same time, like, oh my god, there's no way I'm going to beat them. But they ended up
Hmm.
getting acquired by Capital One, um,
Okay.
and so then basically I told the head of the VP of product, I said, look, I'll be here, whatever you need me. We'll take ownership of whatever you do. Trust, you got to trust me. And I was sitting in front of everybody and all the executives, and I just remember them showing me the software and asking me all these questions. And I said, look, you're talking about UI stuff. What UX is something deeper, and maybe the software or the interface doesn't change. Maybe it's something else, but really you have to understand the users, and that's what you all have to understand is like there's a different process that's involved
Mhm.
versus something that's visual. So from there we've been on the Inc. 5000 3 years in a row. We've helped Fortune 500 companies to startups, and it's been really great because we've seen the evolution of from the .com boom to the .com bust.
Hmm.
But you saw an evolution and a focus on user experience,
Right.
and so that we're kind of seeing the same thing kind of happen now with AI, where and we could get into more of that later, but we're really trying to push companies to become user center focused versus feature center focused. That's your moat.
Mhm.
And for us, we really try to give our clients a cheat code to get to from boardroom, we say from boardroom to code faster with less risk, de-risking things and getting there faster and better. So that's kind of our story. And yeah, we've got a pretty big team. We were up at 50 at one point. Right now we're hovering around like that 35 person mark. We've got UX, product strategy, and front end development.
Wow.
Yeah.
I, I just love seeing that story that you just presented about the underdog kind of overcoming the Goliath. I think honestly, if you're a company that can provide really dedicated service, sometimes it is better for a company to hire someone like that than a massive conglomerate, just because you get that attention.
Yeah, and look, I've worked with and consulted for the big dogs, Accenture, Deloitte. I got people on my team that work for McKinsey. I mean, it's they all come in with big numbers, and there's a big spectrum of what you might get. It's like a box of chocolates with those guys. I mean, um, you kind of know what you're getting with McKinsey, but with like Accenture and Deloitte, it could be a mix. I know of people that have been on those teams are just phenomenal, but then I've been on other teams where there's just like they're 10 years behind, and
Right.
it's and they're paying the max amount you should be paying too. So yeah, with us, we call ourselves like the mini McKinsey, but we take ownership of what we actually recommend and we stick by it. So I think that's why a lot of our engagements are multi-year, and clients see the value of that.
Right. So, talking about what you have, what you offer, do you want to maybe talk us through some of your offerings?
Sure. So, number one, it's project strategy, UX design. I mean, everything to do with the front end is basically that's our sweet spot, and the project strategy piece. It isn't just planning the features; it's really preventing the wrong features from being built.
Right.
Most companies, they just want to jump right into wireframes, jump right into development. They think that's the way to go because they think that's the fastest way to get there. Immediately, that's an immature company. Most companies don't communicate. They're misaligned, and so that product strategy piece is so important because that's what we do to tie in the business goals and objectives. But then it's almost like therapy. And managing people is much harder than actually doing the design work. But you've got a lot of egos in the room, and you've got to put them in their place and say, look, what is the strategy? Everybody's not aligned, and we've got to align that with who your users are, understand what your users' pain points are, and then from there we create a roadmap 6 to 12 months so they know, like, okay, these are the features, these are risky features, we better test them, make sure before we spend a ton of money. And then we've got other features that, hey, we can just start designing it. We know what it is. Let's get it going. Let's get the backlog going. And so we create that like easy process. But then at the same time with our UX design, our UX designers know exactly what questions to ask, what to build, because most of the time UX designers are going from one SME to another. And then by the time it gets to somebody who's, the hippo, the highest paid person in the room, they're like, no, I want to do this. And now you got to start all over again. And so that process that normally occurs takes months, or, it costs a lot of money. And what you get at the end is different than what everybody thought. So then that's kind of where our process of getting leaders aligned, then being part of the UX design and doing things right and setting up success through design systems, things that scale, and then handing off to our front end team that actually understand the tech, because we could design the best thing, but then when we hand off, which is what a lot of companies do, they'll hand off to the dev team, and then they'll be like, okay, we're done. Dev gets it, and they're like, you know what? We can't build this thing. It's going to cost 100 hours. So let's just change it to something else. This will take me 5 hours to do, and it detriments the user experience, and there's no communication. So following that process all the way through, and then testing, is kind of like the whole gambit of what you need to do as a consulting company. And that's when you see the maturity level of a company, that when it's really high, when they have all that in place. But it's really hard to have all that, especially when you have a legacy software, built one product or have it for the last 5 years or 10 years. And now you've got to okay, we've got to redesign and do something new. They're just not equipped to do that.
So it's a holistic approach is what you're basically saying.
Yeah.
And that's where people drop the ball. They divide it into segments instead of looking at it the whole way through as one collective effort.
Exactly. And to champion change from the bottom up is nearly impossible. You have to do it from the top down. And it's an artwork to be able to talk to the executive team and make them feel, you got to get them to trust you, and then you've got to be able to move forward and you got to get this mindset of, what we do is not a commodity. It's not a race to the bottom. You can race to the bottom, great. That's not for us, and we're not for you. So let's get to organizations that, and especially in this day and age with AI, everything is faster. You could copy things faster. You can compete faster. So guess what? You better start iterating faster ahead of them. Otherwise, you'll be left behind.
Right. So talking through the process itself, what does the redesign process actually look like?
So when, again, like I said, most projects or a high percentage of projects fail because everybody wants to jump to wireframes. And to put it simply, if you're going to build a house and you just build a 3-bedroom, 4-bathroom house and you don't even talk to people living in it, do you think they're going to be happy? Probably not.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So what do you do first? And that's kind of where we start off with we call a strategic immersion process. We
Okay.
force alignment before we even touch any type of design. And we do that with the leadership. Um, and then once we get that squared away, we actually do like kind of a reality check and say, okay, what's broken? What, not what you think is broken. We want to tell you exactly what is broken
Okay.
and what's not working. What are the pain points? What are the things we're not solving? And then from there, we create, again, a de-risked roadmap, because there's certain features that they have a high potential return, but they're also a very high level of effort. So if you're going to start doing that, and then all of a sudden you get to a point where after you've launched it, you're like, oh my God, this is not what users want. It's way too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, having the right, you do the user testing. You can spin up prototypes pretty fast, and you can
Right.
talk to users and get the feedback. But again, this is every step of the way, somebody screws up and goes to a poor process that was probably thought of 10 years ago or whatever. But they'll present the designs in front of their users in a group, and guess what? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You'll get this feedback where you're not getting the targeted, like, pretend you're doing this task and then walk me through it.
Hmm.
Again, the highest paid person in the room is probably going to be talking and say, this is what we want, this is what we want, but it's not really what the people want. So
Right.
you have to be really intentful on how you test and test it right, because otherwise we see a lot of times that whoever's paying the highest, the invoices for that company that they're building for has to say in so much, and that becomes a problem down the line. It's not scalable. But then,
Right.
yeah, after that, we get into the wireframes, we get into the traditional kind of UX testing, but again, we're more informed and seeing
Hmm.
how everything aligns. So when you've got multiple ideas, then you can say, well, how does this relate to our business goals? How does this relate to our the actual users' pain points? And
Right.
it's an easier conversation, and then you hand off to development, and then that's where even after you hand off, you know, this is one thing that people don't realize, that we need to make design go from being subjective to objective, and you do that through metrics, and you have to constantly check those metrics, like especially B2C, you want to see conversion rates and things, when are people dropping off. But even at enterprise, you still want to check those things as well, like time on task, how long it takes for people to learn, your NPS scores. Those things are very important, and you
Right.
have to be able to be like, data driven. So yeah, that's kind of like that's how our process works.
It kind of makes me think of that expression, can't see the forest from the trees.
Yep.
Just you're too deep into it from the company itself to actually be able to see what the issues are, too invested. So I
Exactly.
actually want to ask, based on that, what is a common issue in the UX space that companies overlook pretty often?
So I think, if you're so hyper focused on the user, and this is kind of where, when I would say maybe like 10 years ago, is why I saw it more when I was getting into the designs, especially with enterprise. People just, designers especially, are so hyper focused on the user,
Mm,
but you can't be. And I think that's why you saw the rise of like the product owner. The product
mm,
owner has to view from a business side, the dev side, and the UX side. I've always like looked at it from my point of view, so I naturally became a product designer versus a UX designer.
mm-hmm.
And companies think UX is just about the user, but it's actually about your business outcomes as well.
Okay.
And I think the stakeholders, their misalignment, it kind of masquerades as UX problems. And building features users never asked for, because no one's actually validated the assumptions. We've had people who are like in a SME role, they've done it for 2 decades, and then they start working for the software company, and they have all these assumptions. When we actually got in front of users who are doing it now,
Mm,
a lot of assumptions were wrong. And so
okay.
yeah, and so you lean on somebody's expertise thinking they know exactly what's happening, but when you're in it
Right.
day to day, it's different, and you have to get that, especially if it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars and 6 months of time to build something. um, And I think also it's just confusing kind of that modern design look with actual effective design.
Mm,
Um, I think most UX problems aren't UX problems; they're strategy problems in
okay,
disguise.
interesting.
Uh,
So when I was looking through your site initially, I did come
mm-hmm.
across some of the spaces that you're working in.
Mm-hmm.
There are three that I saw that I personally found really interesting, which was robotics,
Yep.
energy, and logistics. Did you maybe want to talk us a little bit through some of your work in those spaces?
Sure, for sure. So with we've designed things for one of the biggest companies in the world, and that's Schlumberger.
Okay.
And they have situations where you're having people in the field who actually have to work with these uh, these interfaces, and
Hmm.
some of it could be life threatening if they don't see this something that's happening. If they're fracking or whatever, and something's happening with the pressure, they have to be able to see these things, notice something's wrong, or whatever the case is.
Hmm.
That it's really important to have that feedback from those users, and so that's like an important thing. But also, there's people who are in the office. There's executives that are looking at this, so there's different use cases of the software that we're building for them, and
Right.
and it's awesome to be in those big companies because you see how siloed they are. They have huge design teams, they have huge development teams, but nobody talks to anybody. And
Yeah.
so, and they move very slow. And so when we get in there, it's like, I just want to move. I want to get things going. And I want to tell them this is how you do it right, instead of just, getting through all the red tape. And so it's great to be able to see, like, get into those companies, but then, yeah, working with smaller, more nimble companies, maybe in the 50 to 200 range. And, that's kind of like, again, our longest client has been for 10 years. They're energy software. They develop for renewables and oil and gas. And so we've been able to work with everything from upstream, midstream to downstream throughout the entire oil and gas process.
Wow.
And then, with the robotics, it's like a serendipitous thing for me because, again, that's what I study for my master's. And
Right.
we worked with Yasukawa, who is they're like number 3 in the world, and that was just an amazing experience when they reached out to me because they tried to work with a different UX design firm. And I call it their BlackBerry of teach pendants, where it's this massive thing that you use to program robots, and it had all these buttons, little tiny screen, super complex. Their robots can do 1,000 times more than their one of their competitors, but their competitors were killing them because it was so easy to set up their robots. You could do it within
Okay.
a day. Their robots, it took like a month to get trained on, and it was so complex.
Okay.
So that's a typical thing where it doesn't matter what the features are; it's how easy the user interface is. And for the problems
Right.
that you want to solve for robotics, it's usually, let's get this manufacturing line up as quick as possible, because then
Mm.
you start producing. That's the problem you're trying to solve, and they didn't solve it. They thought the more features you have, that's what users wanted.
Right.
So yeah, those are like two interesting things that I always love to get into.
Hmm. Yeah, you see that a lot in a lot of electronic spaces where people will often choose, like you said, the simpler one to use, a simpler one to learn, just
Hmm.
because they don't need some of those features particularly. I mean, there will be people who obviously will use them, but the
Yep.
average user may not find that as a factor in deciding what to buy.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, and you'll see it with any type of tech disruption. What you'll see is when you see product under a CTO, immediately that's the wrong hierarchical structure. Product and UX should be at the seat of the table separately, because this dev wants to get things out. They want to build the features. They want to put everything in front of everybody all at once because they're proud of it, and that's great. But
Right.
you have to have the opposite thinking, where it's like, no, we have to make it easy. Cognitive load has to be really super simple. Friction has to be less. So those are things that you have to fight on and figure out what works best. But if it's all
Mm.
under one like technical lead and they're not user focused, they're going to be just naturally feature focused.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So another thing I've noticed is that there's within every industry at the moment, there's been a lot of change.
Hmm.
just with the way things are done, the way things are processed. So with the product release space, what do you think's changed the most in recent years, and why are those traditional methods maybe not working as well as they used to?
Yeah, I think we're watching again. I think I mentioned it earlier. Like we're watching history kind of repeat itself from the .com era. Everybody was drunk on you have a website. It's make it look like Craigslist slash eBay slash this, and we'll make
Right.
billions of dollars, or add a .com to the name, and we'll make millions. And they forget about the user. And the same thing here with AI. I see a lot of clients that are just like, hey, I need to do this and whatnot. But it's like, the pattern was, hey, I need a website, and the website looks like crap. And that was, in the 1999 era.
Yeah.
And then between the 2000 to 2007, I think 2007, 8 or whatever, you had that kind of that crash. But then you started seeing the focus on usability and user-centered design. And that's where Apple really pushed that.
Yeah.
Um,
For
and
sure.
Steve Jobs is just like a savant and a natural at that, because he always just thought about the user experience. And so really Apple pushed that whole thing. And it's not just the interface, it's everything from the moment you get the box shipped to you, how you
Yeah.
open that box and package, to the moment everything else. So, and then, that's where we got kind of that golden age, kind of that after 2007. You have the Google, Amazon, obviously reducing friction. They have their button that was the $1 billion button, or whatever they call it. It's like one buy, click.
Yeah.
Um, so
Why
they,
now?
yeah.
Mhm.
and and then now you have kind of like the companies, they all mastered the whole digital space with the websites and apps and everything. But then now it's like, we need AI, and then you're building these terrible AI experiences. So you're kind of seeing that thing
Yeah.
happen now again. So I think companies are forgetting the user's needs. They're building impressive AI demos, but it's kind of
Mhm.
horrible with the real world usability.
Yeah.
And everybody's just building AI features into their product. But then we're seeing through analytics like, oh, there's a couple prompts, and then they just go back to what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Me personally, I've had a few issues with those AI assistants as well. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies have been using those, and the experience is maybe not as fine tuned as they should have been before they were rolled out.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you're seeing a lot of rappers. I mean, rappers are great, but then they're immediately, as soon as OpenAI or somebody does something to improve on theirs, your business might be out of business pretty quickly. So you've
Yeah.
got to do more than just create a wrapper, and that can be copied in 2 weeks.
Okay. Just changing gears slightly, I
Mm-hmm.
did see on your site a term that you used that I found really interesting, which was dev team augmentation.
Yep.
So, what exactly does that mean, and why is that so necessary in today's market?
Yeah, it's a term that is, I think it's appealing to, I'm thinking about the customer that's visiting my site. If they need help or more horsepower, we offer that. But dev augmentation or design augmentation, um, it's kind of, it's really more hands-on versus strategic. And
Mm.
if we're, it could, it's a revenue generator, of course. You're generating revenue, but the problem is, if you're thrown into a team that has bad processes, it doesn't matter. You have to have people, processes, and a product. That's what makes your company successful. And if you have horrible processes and you throw people that are good in there, they're going to still suffer. So,
Mhm.
you know, even though I say that, and I think one of the things my tech lead always says is like, you can't make a baby with 9 people in 1 month. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, great. I love that.
yeah, so I mean, we would rather add expertise versus just adding extra bodies.
Mm,
We want to solve the problems that created that capacity issue in the first place,
sure.
and you want to be able to understand the knowledge and be able to transfer it. So it's really the if you need augmentation, your real problem isn't really the resources; it's the process.
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot of companies that I've worked at as well.
Hmm.
It's just the wrong approach. They're just not understanding that.
For sure.
So just moving to something different again. Uh, what do you think that people miss in the timeline and the strategy part of the release process? Obviously, that should be at the very start of everything, but it
Hmm.
isn't always.
Yeah, I think you know everybody always wants to focus on speed.
Mhm.
But the real problem is starting with the wrong assumption. Um, and that's already you want speed and direction, especially
Mhm.
now with everybody being able to copy what you're doing so fast. It's you have to have both, and so you need to
Right.
have alignment again with leadership and your teams before you start to execute. Um, you have to validate before you start building, and you have to understand what is the cost of being wrong.
Right.
Um, because yeah, I mean, I've seen so many people just they stop all the main features that we've proven that users want to say, okay, let's integrate Copilot. It's like, no, that's not what they want.
Mhm.
um, so it's I think fast execution with the wrong strategy is worse
Mhm.
than slow execution of the right strategy.
Right.
But everyone optimizes for speed. So
I think the thing is that maybe they don't think about the fact that they're going to have to come back at the end and redesign these things anyway when they find out that people don't like them once they actually launch them.
yep.
So,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, was it worth it?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I was just wondering as well, is there any chance that you could share maybe some client stories where you've really managed to help a company turn things around?
All of them. We turn everything around.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, every single one of them. No, I think I got into some of it with the one that we're competing against the other UX agency.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, again, back to the robotics one. I think I just love that story because it's serendipitous where they reached out to us, Yasukawa. They were we saw the robot, we saw what it can do. They actually, I mean, this is the other thing is where people who are in this industry, they think they can hire somebody or an agency, and they realize there's different ways in which an agency approaches these things, and
Yeah.
especially when it's hardware and software combined and something that's this complex. They're like, oh yeah, it didn't work, and I'm like, oh yeah, if you just hired any type of traditional UX agency, they're going to make some pretty visuals, but there's no way they can deep dive into this without any understanding of robotics. And
Yeah.
so within 6 months, we were able to, we implemented our process. I was there, I was recording how a robot picks and plays certain things. How's it work? How they program it? What do you see? And you're taking something that has tons of physical buttons, and they wanted to make it all touchscreen. And so, it was a really big leap, but they also want to make it look and compete with these other companies that were super easy to set up, very quick, less cognitive load on every screen. So that was it was they were wide open to the suggestions that we made. They were great because they saw me there. I mean, I was there a lot,
Right.
videotaping, recording, and then showing like this is why we're doing this. And so they basically redesigned, they launched it, and it's still, if you go on their site, you see their teach pennant. That's the exact design that we helped with, and they presented it at South by Southwest, which is crazy. That's awesome to do that. And yeah, they
Hmm.
said it was amazing. And so like those kind of stories we love to hear and love to see the successes of our clients.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Moving away from your company specifically, I'd like to talk a little bit about the industry and trends in the space that you're operating within.
Yep.
So AI is obviously something that's come up a few times on this, and it's going to because everyone is talking about AI right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you see as AI's role in the product release process? Where should that be implemented?
So, yeah, I've made a lot of posts on LinkedIn about this. Especially, I'm trying to be more because everybody's posting, oh, it's make millions or $100,000, doing these AI agents per month and automation, blah blah blah. It's saving me this much time. It's it's again, it doesn't matter the back end. Nobody cares the back end as long as it's working. Again, it's just like the browser battles,
Mm.
AOL, Netscape, Safari, Google Chrome. Who came out the winner? Google's one of definitely the most used because it's the by far the easiest. It had the best results. I mean, who cares what was happening in the back end? Just show me what I need to be seeing, and for me, the user, I want the outcomes. And so companies, they're so hypnotized by AI, and whether it can do all these things. And we're hearing more and more about, like, there's definitely a certain force multiplier with AI that can help you with things. I use it all the time. I use it to help me with, like, crunching data, going through ideas. I suck at writing, so it definitely helps improve on my thought process. I'll jot things
Right.
down or record audio, and then it'll kind of refine those ideas, and I just kind of work through that. But that's through my experience. I kind of know the process in my head of how I go from idea to code.
Right.
And so for me, it becomes that force multiplier. But if I'm prompting it to do design this app to do this and that, it's better for me just to sketch, figure out,
Mm-hmm.
obviously figure out what I need to build for the user, what pain points, do all that upfront stuff, but then sketch it out, and then I could wireframe. I could do that much faster and much more efficient than just prompting for hours.
Right.
And it's not there yet. But if a login screen, yeah, that's easy. There's a set way in which we know how that works. So
Mm-hmm.
you can have AI do that. But I think from a development standpoint, I'm seeing the same thing. There's certain tasks that it helps with development. It does help with the code. It helps you check things, but other things, it's slower, or it's not as efficient, or it gets it wrong. And
Right.
if you're not aware of those things, if you just hired a bunch of junior devs that aren't that good, and they're all using the same kind of code base or vibe coding, guess what? We've got cybersecurity clients. They're sitting there behind a tree, that meme where he's licking their lips, and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
just waiting for these hacks to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, there's glaring holes in it, and there's going to be privacy issues, security issues. You name it. So yeah, I'm like I said, I feel like the moat is still making it very important to do your user research,
Mm-hmm.
really think about the front end, and then that's gonna help you build that moat to separate yourselves from everybody else.
I love that approach because I think a lot of people haven't been discussing the risks and the negatives of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are just looking at the opportunity that it provides. So I like
For
hearing
sure.
that other aspect, the other viewpoint on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, so another thing that I wanted to discuss with you was global events. So talking things like COVID, regional conflicts, tariffs, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that those have impacted the product release process in any major way?
Um, not directly. I think with COVID, basically, I've always had to compete globally. You can offshore your stuff to different people, um, and there's different levels of the expertise that you get. And I think with remote work and everything, that kind of accelerated that,
Mm-hmm.
because I was the busiest during COVID, because my entire team was remote already, so we were
Mm-hmm.
equipped to, like, already handle all of our clients' needs, and we blew up during COVID. We hit our huge revenue jumps and massive project jumps just during that time, because we were equipped to do it. I've been doing it for 10 years that way, and I knew how to work remote teams, because communication is such a big thing when you're
Mm-hmm.
working remotely. And so I think, with just macro conditions, there's uncertainty in what was going to happen. And I think you still have to fundamentally, if you're going to try to look for ways in which to be more efficient, to cut costs, you have to still, again, it goes back to communication. If the more spread out your teams are, the more hyper focused you got to be on communicating. Like I always tell my team, let's over communicate. And it's not necessarily being in meetings. It could just be, we don't have to have all this documentation. We don't have to have all this. Let's get on a call and talk things through. And it's like conversations over documentation. So that's kind of where I've always, like, pushed on my side. But
Right.
I think the kind of the macro conditions and economic pressures, it always gets people scared about
Mm-hmm.
innovation. Like, they always pull back on innovation because they're like, we're not sure where this is going.
Too risky
But
right now.
yeah, but the problem is with AI, if you hold back on innovation, if a company, your competitor, doesn't hold back, they're going to launch right past you very quickly. And so if you're hyper focused on how you innovate and do it right, then you're not wasting so much money. And so I think that's the thing where people don't realize, like, yeah, if you put on the brakes of innovation and you're not constantly improving on things and you just kind of do the status quo, you're like, oh, what's this competitor doing? What's that competitor? Let's just kind of do what they're doing.
Right.
You're always going to be one step behind. So I think it's really the companies have to pivot their thinking and really understand, like, let's get rid of the waste in their process and let's really get into what matters.
Makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on time. I had one more thing I wanted to discuss with you, which
Yep.
was, and I think you'll have a strong opinion on this, but
Mm-hmm.
so UX, user experience, do you find that in the last few years has kind of become much more in the foreground as a key metric for success?
Um, with mature companies, yes, I think for sure, yes. But on the flip side, I've seen it become more of a commodity, where
Okay.
again they're just like, hey, we just need wireframes. That's what I'm asked first, and that immediately tells me that's wrong, because again they're falling back into the bad habits of 20 years ago,
Mm,
of just, yeah, give me the wireframes at the end of the process. Just make it
right.
look pretty. Give me less clicks, and that's less clicks doesn't mean a better experience. That just means less clicks. And
Right.
maybe it's a form that has 50 different fields on one page. Yeah, it's less clicks to different pages, but that's overwhelming to users and they're just going to drop off. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think there's more awareness of it, but there's also been more the wrong approach to it, because they're like, yeah, we need it, but just throw it at the end type of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
For me personally, as like a user, the one thing that really puts me off, and I've seen this actually, I might say more frequently in the last few years, is how navigatable a website is. If I have to really look to
Hmm.
find like a basic contact form or to find like basic information, I'm going to look somewhere else.
Oh yeah, we're
It's just because,
we get so frustrated so much faster now because we know what we
yeah,
need to expect. So it's
exactly. It's a
even
bit more
more
standard.
important.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's so much competition now. It's like, you
Yep.
know, that if this company, I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, but for the most part, you know, if this company can't provide it, there'll be a bunch of other ones that you can Google, find
Yeah.
another one in like a few seconds and see. And if they're easy to navigate and use, then you're going to go that way.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, pain, price, those are like two important things when it
Yeah,
comes to, yeah, user experience. If you don't solve those two, yeah, forget it.
exactly.
Yep.
So that kind of brings us to time. So I just have one more question for you.
Yeah.
If people wanted to, get in touch, see what you're offering, that sort of thing, what are the best places to do that?
Yeah, definitely. We actually have a podcast ourselves. I think I mean, it's blown up as well. I think we just hit like 24,000 subscribers.
Nice.
It's called Make an Impact Podcast. We talk about AI, UX, things like that. Check that out. But yeah, visit our website at Impact, three I's, mpact.io. You can reach me there. I'm on all the social networks as well, on LinkedIn. So yeah, reach out, and yeah, I would love to. Always love hearing about people's projects, seeing where they're at, and just making an assessment and just say, hey, look, this is something that we can help with, or maybe not. But yeah, this has been great. I love these type of podcasts. This has been awesome. So I appreciate having me on.
Well, thank you. It's been fascinating talking with you. Really appreciate it. Maybe come back on another time. There's a lot to talk about, obviously.
For sure.
Um, but for anyone listening at home, thank you so much for tuning in, and come back next time. We'll have another guest for you.